There's a stretch of road just outside Mason Hollow that doesn't exist on any GPS. Locals call it County Road 6, but even the oldest maps show nothing there, just forest and farmland. Yet, every so often, travelers claim they find themselves driving it, almost by accident. And when they do, they find the gas station. It was past midnight when Caleb took the wrong turn. He had been driving deliveries for over 12 hours, his eyes heavy, his playlist long finished. The night was foggy, so thick it looked like smoke drifting across the fields. He was sure he had taken the interstate, but his phone lost signal an hour ago, and every attempt to turn back seemed to bring him deeper into nowhere. His gas light blinked on. The needle hovered over empty. And then, just as panic began to crawl up his throat, he saw it. A faint red glow cutting through the fog. A gas station, standing alone at the edge of the woods. The sign read, "Earl's Gas and Snacks," its paint chipped and faded. One fluorescent tube flickered above the single pump, casting ghostly shadows that bent and warped with each buzz. The building itself was small, almost too small for how long it looked in the dark. A squat brick station with grimy windows and a narrow door that seemed to lean inward. Caleb pulled in. The sound of gravel under his tires echoed unnaturally loud. When he stepped out, the air was still. No crickets, no wind, no hum of distant traffic, just the faint electric buzz of the sign overhead. He grabbed the nozzle and placed it in his tank. To his surprise, it worked. Fuel started flowing, even though the pump looked like it belonged in a museum. The mechanical counter ticked unevenly, the numbers jumping, sometimes rolling backward before correcting themselves. He frowned, but exhaustion made him careless. Then the door creaked open. A man stepped out, wiping his hands on a rag. His uniform was clean but faded. A dark green shirt tucked into slacks, a cracked name tag pinned crookedly to his chest. It read, "Earl." "You're lucky we're open this late," the man said, voice flat, like he was reciting something he'd said 1,000 times. Caleb chuckled nervously. "Yeah, no kidding. I thought this place was abandoned." Earl tilted his head, eyes narrowing slightly. "Has been, for most folks." Inside, the store looked frozen in time. Shelves lined with old snacks whose logos Caleb hadn't seen since childhood. A radio on the counter played a faint, distorted song, something from the 70s, but the dial wasn't turned on. Behind the counter, a rotary phone sat beside a register that looked almost ornamental. Caleb picked out a bottle of water and a bag of chips just to make small talk. When he reached the counter, Earl was staring at him, still and silent. How much do I owe you?" Caleb asked. Earl blinked. "We only take cash." Caleb hesitated. He only had a $20 bill in his wallet. He handed it over. Earl took it gently, his fingers cold as ice. The register rang with a dull metallic ding, and a paper receipt slid out. Caleb looked at it and froze. The date read November 2nd, 1979. He looked up. Earl was gone. The store lights flickered, buzzing violently. The radio shifted to static, then voices. Faint at first. "Bart, trapped inside. Can't get out. Earl." The lights went out. Caleb stumbled backward, knocking over a display. The door at the back of the store slammed shut, though no one had gone through it. He grabbed his keys and bolted outside. But the gas station wasn't there anymore. Where the station had stood seconds ago was an empty clearing, overgrown with weeds and broken concrete. His truck was still parked exactly where he left it, but now it sat on cracked asphalt, half swallowed by grass. The sign, the lights, the pump, gone. His heart pounded as he climbed into the cab. The receipt still sat on the passenger seat, but it had changed. The ink was faded, the paper yellowed. Written in shaky pen at the bottom was a new line. "Paid in full, see you next time." The engine started without hesitation. The fuel gauge read full, though Caleb swore he hadn't pumped more than a few dollars worth. He drove as fast as he could until he reached the next town. When he told the locals about the gas station, their faces went pale. "Son," an old mechanic said, "that place burned down in 1979. Attendant was a man named Earl. They say he stayed behind to help a traveler when the pump exploded." Caleb didn't sleep that night. And the next morning, when he walked to his truck, he saw a faint handprint on his driver's side window, smudged in ash. Since that night, every year on November 2nd, Caleb's fuel tank mysteriously fills itself. He's learned not to question it. He just avoids County Road 6 and never ever drives after midnight. There's a small town in northern Kansas called Elbridge, a place most people only pass through on their way to somewhere bigger, somewhere louder. It's the kind of town where time seems to stand still. The post office still uses handwritten logs. The single diner still serves coffee for 50 cents and everyone knows everyone else's name. At the far end of Main Street, where the asphalt starts to crack and the woods begin to take over, there stands a house, 2 stories, white siding gone gray with age, and a porch that sags ever so slightly toward the earth. But it isn't the house's age that makes people avoid it. It's the light. Every night, without fail, a single blue porch light flickers on at exactly 7:03 p.m. and burns until sunrise. It never goes out. No one changes the bulb. No one dares to step onto that porch. Because every person in town knows what happened there, even if they pretend they don't. Marlene and Carl didn't. They were newcomers, outsiders, a young couple from Wichita who wanted a slower life. They'd sold everything to buy their first home, and when they saw the listing online, charming country property, fully furnished, incredible price, they couldn't believe their luck. The photos showed sunlit rooms, tall oaks, and that quiet little porch with a soft blue glow that seemed peaceful. When they arrived, the realtor, a nervous woman named Lydia, barely looked them in the eye. "You'll find it's different," she said as she handed them the keys. "Just remember, that light stays on, no matter what. Promise me." Marlene laughed awkwardly. "You mean like forever?" Lydia nodded once. "Forever." At first, they thought it was a small town superstition. Maybe it kept bugs away. Maybe it was some old town tradition. But when the sun went down that first night, and the blue glow spilled across the porch and into their living room, it felt colder than any light should. The shadows it cast didn't look right, too long, too sharp, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Days passed quietly. They unpacked, met the neighbors, tried the diner. Everyone was polite but distant. When Marlene mentioned which house they'd bought, conversations always ended the same way. A tight smile, a muttered, "Be careful," and then silence. The first strange thing happened on the 5th night. Marlene woke to a faint tapping sound coming from downstairs. She thought maybe Carl was up getting a drink. But when she called his name, there was no answer. The tapping continued, rhythmic, deliberate, against the front door. She peered through the window, but the porch was empty. Still, the blue light outside flickered as if disturbed by something unseen. When Carl came down moments later, the sound stopped. He opened the door, but there was nothing, only the night air and the rustle of the trees. The next morning, they found muddy handprints on the outside of the door, child-sized. A week later, during a thunderstorm, the house came alive. The rain hammered against the windows and lightning flashed every few seconds, illuminating the yard in bursts of white. Then, with a low hum, The blue porch light began to fade. Marlene watched it through the front window as it dimmed, flickered, and finally went out. The power didn't fail. The lamps were still on, but the air in the house changed instantly. The temperature dropped so fast Marlene could see her breath. Then came the whispering. Faint at first, like wind sneaking through the walls. But soon, it became words. A woman's voice, then a man's. Then more, overlapping, crying, pleading. Carl ran to the porch to screw the bulb tighter, thinking it had come loose. When he touched the fixture, the metal seared his skin. He screamed and stumbled back, and in that flash of lightning, Marlene saw them. Figures standing in the yard, soaked, dripping, their eyes reflecting the faintest blue from the dying light. Dozens of them, men, women, children, all standing perfectly still, facing the house. Carl slammed the door and turned every lock. The voices stopped. The air grew still again. Then, without warning, the blue light buzzed back to life, brighter than ever. When they looked outside, the yard was empty. The rain had washed everything clean, except for one thing. Across the porch floor were wet footprints leading to the front door and stopping right at the threshold. That night, they didn't sleep. When morning came, Marlene found an old photo wedged under the front mat. It showed a group of people standing in front of the same house, same porch, same siding, but much younger, maybe from the 1950s. In the center was a man with slicked back hair holding a little girl. Scribbled on the back in faded ink were the words, "The last night before the flood, June 12, 1957. That afternoon, Marlene went back into town and found Lydia, the realtor, sitting alone in her car. "Who are they?" Marlene asked, holding up the photo. Lydia didn't look surprised. "They were the Hendersons," she said. "That house used to sit closer to the river before they moved the road. The flood came without warning, took the whole family. Locals say the father tried to save them, kept a lantern burning on the porch to help rescuers find their way. But by the time help arrived, the lantern was all that was left. That blue light's been burning ever since." Marlene's voice shook. "Then why tell us to keep it on?" Lydia turned toward her, eyes hollow. "Because when it goes out, they come back." That night, Marlene and Carl sat together on the couch, holding hands, watching the blue glow seep through the curtains. Every hour, Marlene checked the bulb to make sure it was still burning. Around 3 a.m., Carl finally drifted off to sleep. Marlene stayed up, and that's when she saw something. It's a figure on the porch, not outside the light this time, inside it. It was the little girl from the photo, her hair plastered to her forehead, her dress torn, her bare feet dripping water onto the boards. She stared at Marlene through the window, eyes black as coal. Then she smiled. Slowly, Marlene screamed, waking Carl, but when he turned on the lights, she was gone. Only the porch remained and that relentless blue light burning through the glass. They left Elbridge 3 days later, drove away in the middle of the night and never came back. The house still stands at the edge of town. No one's bought it since. The mail piles up, the weeds grow wild, but every single night at exactly 7:03 p.m., that blue porch light still hums to life. And every few years when the river floods again, townsfolk say they see silhouettes standing beneath it, soaked to the bone, waiting to be let in. Maple Hollow was the kind of town that the world forgot. One of those places where every house seemed frozen in another time, where paint peeled in perfect vertical lines and the air smelled faintly of rust and pine. No one moved there anymore. People only ever left. At its center stood a single street, Main Street, lined with shuttered stores and empty windows. The diner still opened every morning, and the post office still pretended it had mail to deliver. But everyone in Maple Hollow knew what really defined the town wasn't what happened by day. It was what happened one night each year, the night of the silent parade. The story began over a century ago, in the autumn of 1912, when the town's only mine, the Hollow Creek Mine, collapsed. 37 men were trapped underground after a support beam gave way, and the rescue team spent 5 days digging through the rock, listening to the fading knocks from beneath the earth. By the 6th day, the knocking stopped. The mine was sealed, the families mourned, and the town moved on, or tried to. But something changed after that. At first, it was small things. Horses refusing to take the road that led to the mine. Doors found open in the mornings. Candles lit in the church, though no one claimed to light them. Then, on the first anniversary of the collapse, a man named Ellis Ward was walking home from the tavern just before dawn when he saw something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He said he heard the church bell ring, slow and deep, even though the bell tower had been struck by lightning and out of service for years. When he looked down Main Street, through the heavy morning mist, he saw them. Figures walking silently in a line. Dozens of them. Men, women, and children, their heads bowed, their clothes torn and caked with coal dust. They didn't speak. They didn't even look up. They just walked, single file, from the direction of the old mine, through the town square, and into the woods. Ellis tried to follow, but his legs wouldn't move. He said the air around them was so heavy it felt like the entire world was holding its breath. When he finally managed to blink, they were gone. By the next year, others claimed to see the same thing, always on the same night, the eve of the Harvest Festival, always at the same time, just before dawn, and always silent. Over the decades, people stopped questioning it. They built their lives around it. Businesses closed early on the eve of the festival. Curtains stayed drawn. No one left their homes after midnight. Maple Hollow became a town that learned to live with its ghosts. Then came Hannah. She wasn't from Maple Hollow. She was a journalist, or maybe something closer to an adventurer with a camera. Her online column, The Places That Time Forgot, covered everything from haunted train depots to ghost towns swallowed by the desert. When she first read about the silent parade online, she assumed it was a local myth, the perfect mix of tragedy and folklore. She arrived a week before the festival, renting a cabin near the edge of town. Her first night there, she walked the main street just to take photos. The town looked deserted, except for an old diner at the end of the block, where a flickering neon sign buzzed, "Coffee open 24 hours." Inside, the smell of grease and burnt toast lingered in the air. The woman behind the counter introduced herself as Ruth, her hair silver, her eyes sharp and tired. When Hannah mentioned why she'd come, Ruth's smile faltered. "You came for the parade?" she asked quietly. Hannah laughed, "If it even exists." Ruth set down the coffee pot. "Oh, it exists, but it's not something you should watch. People who do don't stay right after." The word stuck with her. On the night of the festival, the town was alive again, for a while. Kids ran around with paper lanterns, a small band played near the square, and vendors sold roasted corn and pumpkin pie. But at 10 o'clock, everything stopped. The lights went out. The band packed up. The laughter vanished. By 11, the streets were empty. Hannah stood on the old bridge overlooking the mine road, camera ready, her breath visible in the cold. Midnight came, and with it, the first toll of the bell, low, distant, echoing through the hills. The sound didn't fade like it should have. It lingered in the air like smoke. Then she saw the lanterns. Faint at first, like floating embers moving through the fog. Dozens of them weaving slowly down the road from the direction of the old mine. And then, out of the darkness, came the shapes. They were people. Men in heavy mining clothes, women in long torn dresses, children clutching hands, all walking silently, their eyes open but blank, their faces streaked with ash and earth. None of them spoke. None of them made a sound at all. Even their footsteps were silent. Hannah whispered into her recorder, her voice trembling. "This is it. Oh my God, this is it." The figures passed beneath the bridge, their movements slow and synchronized, as if drawn by an invisible pull. Hannah leaned over the railing to get a better shot, snapping photo after photo, until one of the figures looked up. It was a man, or what had once been one. His face was almost featureless, smoothed over like wet clay, except for a pair of hollow sockets where his eyes should have been. And though his mouth didn't move, Hannah heard a voice in her mind. "Stop watching." She stumbled backward, heart pounding. The man raised his arm and pointed straight at her, and in that moment, every single figure stopped walking. The silence was absolute. Then, one by one, they turned, all facing her. The air turned electric. Her camera froze, the lens shaking. Through the viewfinder, she saw them closer now, impossibly close, their faces pressed against the bridge's underside, staring up at her. The next thing she remembered was waking in her car at dawn, parked on the edge of town. Her clothes were soaked with dew. Her camera was shattered, the memory card cracked clean down the middle. When she checked her phone, there was only one photo saved to the cloud, one she didn't remember taking. It showed Main Street, empty, but in the distance, barely visible through the fog, a line of figures walking toward the woods. She left Maple Hollow that same day. Months later, someone found her audio recorder at a pawn shop in the next county. The file was damaged, but at the end of the tape, just before the static cut out, a voice could be heard whispering faintly. It wasn't Hannah's voice. It said, "It's almost dawn, we're walking again." To this day, the people of Maple Hollow still lock their doors on the night of the Harvest Festival. The church bell still tolls 13 times, even though the tower is nothing but rubble. And every year, a few curious strangers show up, cameras in hand, ready to see the truth. Most leave disappointed, but some never leave at all. Because the silent parade isn't a performance, it's a procession, and once you've seen it, you're part of it. There's an old stretch of highway that cuts through the plains of Oklahoma, a long, lonely road that never seems to end. Truckers call it Route 113, though most GPS maps don't recognize the number anymore. There are no gas stations for miles, no cell towers, no houses, just wind, dust, and silence. But if you drive that road after midnight, sometimes you'll see lights ahead, a faded neon sign flickering pink against the darkness, reading, "Welcome to Desert View Motel, vacancy." No one knows who built it or how long it's been there. Some say it's a mirage, others say it's a trap. But everyone who's ever stayed there has a story, and not all of them live to tell it. It was the summer of 1998 when Michael Garrison, a traveling salesman, took the wrong exit off Interstate 40. He'd been on the road for 16 hours straight, half asleep behind the wheel, trying to make it to Amarillo before dawn. But the storm that rolled in that night had other plans. Lightning tore through the sky, rain pounding so hard it felt like someone was dumping buckets over his windshield. Then his engine sputtered, the radio went to static, the headlights flickered. Michael cursed, tapping the dashboard, squinting through the blur of water. And that's when he saw it. A glowing neon sign ahead, rising out of the dark like a beacon. "Desert View Motel?" He pulled into the gravel lot, relief washing over him. The building looked old but well kept, a one-story structure with 10 rooms, all lined in a perfect row. The front office light was on. A rusted Coke machine hummed beside the door, and above it, a moth-eaten flag fluttered weakly in the wind. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and dust. A man stood behind the counter, tall, thin, his smile too wide for his face. "Rough night, huh?" the man said. His name tag read Clyde. "You could say that," Michael sighed. "Storm nearly ran me off the road." "Well, lucky you found us," Clyde said cheerfully. "Not many do. Room 7's open. Cash only." Michael paid, signed the register, which oddly enough already had his name written in neat cursive, and took the key. Room 7 looked normal enough. Bed, lamp, TV that only played static. The wallpaper was peeling, but the place was dry and warm. Exhausted, Michael collapsed onto the bed and was asleep within minutes. He woke up at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of footsteps outside his door. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Gravel crunching under boots. Then a soft knock. Michael sat up, heart thudding. "Yeah?" he called out. No answer, just silence. He stood, crept toward the peephole. Someone was standing there. A man, tall, wearing a trench coat and a hat pulled low over his face. He wasn't moving, just standing perfectly still in the rain. Michael froze, every muscle locking up. After a full minute, the man slowly turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. Michael waited, breath trembling. Then, from the far end of the motel came the faint sound of another door opening, then slamming shut. He told himself it was just another guest, maybe Clyde's night staff. But something felt off. The silence outside wasn't natural. Even the rain had stopped. When he finally drifted back to sleep, his dreams were full of static, white noise and voices whispering his name. At dawn, he went to check out, but the front office was empty. The bell on the counter didn't ring when he pressed it. Behind the desk, the logbook sat open, the same one he'd signed the night before. Only now, the ink was smeared, and next to his name, someone had written, "Checked out 3:17 a.m. Michael's chest tightened. He backed away, grabbed his bag, and rushed to his car. But the parking lot was empty. The other rooms' doors hung open, their interiors gutted and full of dust. The neon sign above the office flickered faintly before dying altogether. He started his car, desperate to leave, but when he pulled onto the road, his rearview mirror showed something that made his stomach twist. The motel was gone. In its place stood an empty field, dry, cracked earth stretching for miles. No building, no sign, no lights. Just a faint outline in the dirt where the foundation had once been. Michael made it to the next town 2 hours later, still shaking. He stopped at a diner to call his wife, but when he asked the locals about Desert View Motel, their faces changed. "There ain't no motel out there," one old trucker said. "Not for 30 years. Burned down in '68. Lightning hit the propane tanks. Whole place went up. Everyone inside, gone." Michael tried to explain what he'd seen, but the trucker just shook his head. "Count yourself lucky you made it out." 3 weeks later, a highway patrolman found Michael's car abandoned on Route 113. The keys were still in the ignition. The doors were open. The only thing inside was his wallet, and the motel key, still attached to its tag. Room 7. The patrol report noted one final detail. When the officer picked up the key, he noticed something etched faintly on the metal. Words so worn down they were almost invisible. It said, "Check in anytime. Check out never. To this day, truckers claim that when the fog rolls across Route 113, they sometimes see a flicker of pink light in the distance, a neon sign glowing for a split second before vanishing. And if you ever find yourself lost on that road at night, with the fuel light blinking red, and you see a motel ahead that shouldn't exist, don't stop. Keep driving. Because if you pull into that lot and see a man named Clyde smiling behind the counter, your name's already in the book. In the heart of Fairfield County, there used to be a small AM radio station called WZOR 1460, perched on the edge of town beside an abandoned grain mill. It had gone off air decades ago, or at least that's what everyone thought. The building itself was a relic, a squat brick structure with shattered windows, an old antenna leaning like a broken finger toward the sky, and a rusted door padlocked shut. But every so often, especially on stormy nights, truckers driving through the valley would pick up a faint signal on their dials. The voice was calm, steady, and old-fashioned. A man's voice announcing, "You're listening to WZOR, broadcasting all night from Maple County, stay tuned." No one could ever trace it. The frequency didn't officially exist anymore. The FCC had terminated WZOR's license in 1987 after a fire gutted the building and killed the night host Walter Gray, who'd been working alone during a lightning storm. But sometimes when the wind was right and the air heavy with static, the voice still came through. And that's where the story begins, with a man named Eli Turner, a late-night trucker with too many miles behind him and not enough left ahead. It was close to 2 a.m. when Eli found himself driving through the rain, fighting sleep. His CB radio was dead, his phone had no signal, and his only company was the whisper of tires on wet asphalt. Out of habit, he turned the old analog dial on his truck radio, searching for a voice, any voice. That's when he found it. The static cleared, and a deep, warm voice came through. "Good evening, night travelers. You're tuned to WZOR 1460, coming to you from the quiet fields of Maple County. Drive safe, and remember, not all roads lead where you think they do." Eli frowned. The tone was strange, almost hypnotic, but it was comforting too. The station played soft jazz, old swing songs he hadn't heard in years. It felt like being pulled back into another time. As he drove, the host's voice returned between songs, smooth as silk. "Special thanks to our listener out there on Highway 9 in the blue rig. You look tired, friend. Don't stop yet." Eli's hand froze on the wheel. He was driving on Highway 9. His truck was blue. He switched off the radio immediately. The static hissed like a sigh. A few moments later, his headlights flickered. His dashboard lights dimmed. The engine sputtered once, then twice, and then died completely. He coasted to the side of the road and sat in silence, rain hammering the roof. The world outside was pitch black. Then, through the windshield, he saw it. A faint orange glow just down the road. A radio tower. The old WZOR tower. He knew it was impossible. The place had burned down. But there it was. Lights flickering. A red beacon blinking at the top. And beneath it, a single yellow glow coming from the building's windows. Eli climbed out, flashlight in hand, and made his way toward it. The rain had turned to mist. The closer he got, the more he could hear. Faint music echoing from inside. Old-time swing, skipping on a vinyl loop. The front door stood half open, hinges groaning in the wind. Inside, the air smelled of smoke and mildew. Dust floated in the beam of his flashlight, and everything looked frozen in time. Papers on desks, microphones still positioned as if ready to record. Then he saw the on-air light glowing red above the booth. The door creaked open on its own, and inside, sitting behind the microphone, was a man. or what looked like one. He was wearing a dark suit, perfectly pressed despite the grime, his hair slicked back. His skin was pale, cracked around the lips, like something that had been dried out long ago. His voice, though, was alive. "Good evening, friend," the man said. "You're right on time." Eli took a step back. "Who are you?" The man smiled faintly. "You know who I am. You've been listening." The turntable beside him spun slowly, the same jazz song repeating endlessly. On the walls hung yellowed newspaper clippings about the fire, headlines reading "Radio host dies in blaze" and "Bayzor station to close." Eli's throat went dry. "This place burned down. You died." "Yes," the man said, his voice calm. "The station burned, but the signal never stopped. You can't stop a story once it's told, not if someone's still listening." The radio on the desk hissed to life. Static filled the room, and through it came Eli's own voice, trembling, echoing, as if recorded moments ago. "Who are you?" The man turned toward the sound. "You are now," he whispered. The red on-air light flared brighter, flooding the booth with crimson glow. The walls rippled like heat waves. The smell of smoke grew thick. The last thing Eli remembered was the sound of his own breathing. And then, nothing. 3 days later, a highway patrolman found Eli's rig parked on the shoulder of Route 9. The truck was empty. The driver's seat was still warm, coffee cup half full. The radio was on, tuned to static. The logbook in the passenger seat had one final line written in shaky pen. "Vzor 1460 still broadcasting." After that, reports started again. Truckers, night shift workers, even ham radio operators began picking up faint transmissions. Always around 2 a.m. Always the same calm voice saying, "Good evening, night travelers. You're listening to WZOR, where every story deserves one last listener." Those who tried to record the broadcast said the tape never played back right, just static, whispers, and faint laughter. One recording technician claimed he heard Eli's voice among them, stuttering the same words over and over. "You can't stop the story. You can't stop the story." The old WZOR building is still there, half buried in vines, the tower leaning dangerously close to collapse. Locals say that on stormy nights you can still see the red on-air light flicker through the windows, but no one goes near it anymore. Because if you step inside, they say you won't just hear the broadcast, you'll become it. Your voice joins the airwaves, trapped between frequencies, speaking to travelers who don't yet know they're lost. And when the static clears, if you're unlucky enough to be listening at 1460 a.m., you might just hear your own name. If you made it this far, thank you for spending your night with us. If these stories gave you chills, there's plenty more waiting. Don't forget to subscribe to Night Fear Stories for new terrifying tales every single night. Sleep well, if you can.